An unprecedented moment in India's history. Narendra Modi was sworn in for a third consecutive term as India's Prime Minister on Sunday, becoming second only to India's founding Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to achieve this milestone. However, some view the results as a personal setback for Modi, as his party lost its parliamentary majority for the first time, compelling him to govern through a coalition. This raises questions about his ability to govern effectively over the next 5 years. So what led to his underperformance, especially in his traditional strongholds? And what impact will Modi's re-election have on regional and international relations? I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Rong Ying, Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies, and from Maryland, the US, by Sourabh Gupta, Senior Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. Welcome, gentlemen, to the point. So, Mr. Rong, help us understand. Now, Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, is the biggest party within the National Democratic Alliance coalition, which won a slim parliamentary majority. But the BJP lost the parliamentary majority as a party. Now, he, however, made history by becoming, as I said, the second prime minister in India's history to run for to win the third consecutive term of office as prime minister. How significant is his win?
Well, I think it is true. The election, the result has been a setback personally for Prime Minister Modi, even though I think arguably he also win the third executive term, that so-called hat trick status, and also I think politically for the BJP. But arguably the NDA remains now the ruling, the coalition remains to rule the government. And so I think how to interpret this verdict, the mandate by the Indian voters, is an interesting sort of a part. But so far, the majority of the views, both in India and outside, welcomes this development, even though in a different sort of terms, in different ways. Having said that, I would say it is one thing is for sure that the NDA coalition or Modi-led NDA is going to face some challenges ahead, not only in terms of politics, coalition politics, but more importantly for its economic agenda, which I think in the process, in the campaign, Prime Minister Modi and the BJP has run a campaign that the majority, the super majority of BJP or NDA would help Modi, would help BJP to pursue its own agenda.
That's why
now it seems that we have a different story.
That's why the underperformance. Mr. Gupta, this is the first time since Modi took office that his party failed to secure a majority on its own. Does it diminish Modi's image of invincibility, and what does it mean for India's domestic politics?
Oh, absolutely. The invincible image that Mr. Modi and his party and his media managers have created has essentially been punctured. The Indian electorate has been casting ballots from the 1950s onwards. There's a reality of their own lived experience and then what media managers say. And unfortunately, the party, the BJP and Mr. Modi were caught up more in what their media managers were saying and what he was saying than what the experience on the ground really was. And so there has been a sort of, this is a personal setback, there has been a puncturing. And so he will now have to redo his sums and how he governs. This is not necessarily always a bad thing. The real growth spurt in India began from 1990, which was also the date from roughly when coalition governments began. And until Mr. Modi came to office in 2014, for 25 years, there were coalition governments and the Indian economy ran at a rate of 6, 7, 8%. So it's not necessarily the case that coalitions will hurt. And secondly, I would also add, Mr. Modi's BJP predecessor, a gentleman by the name of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who actually had very good relations with China. This is around in the 2000s. He ran a minority BJP government which depended on coalition partners. The key coalition partner now was the same coalition partner then. It's a pro-business party from South India. So this is actually a good sign in the sense that Mr. Modi will have to dispense with some of his Hindu-Muslim polarizing antics, as well as some of his religious cultural assertion. I think there's a fatigue in that regard, and people are looking for jobs, people are looking for low employment, and if there's a pro-business coalition partner holding his feet to the fire, he needs to redo his sums, and I think this is an opportunity also for him.
Mr. Rong, some critics suggest that the election results reflect a message from the public that people are tired of the BJP's 10-year rule and want a change. Is that true?
Well, I would say that it is true, but it may not true. It is true in the sense that I think the BJP arrogance, or the way that BJP that have been governed around the country in the past 10 years by in a way that that give them the impression, or literally I think is being pursuing a kind of a agenda or strategy that's economically has not bring a kind of as many benefits or equitable benefits to the electorate, and politically I think very much focus on the Hindu nationalist agenda at the expenses of these underprivileged Muslims, other things, and so forth. So this is something I think the Indian voters, Indian electorate don't like. But having said that, if you look at the votes, they still, I think, the NDA had the majority. And if you look at the terms of seats, BJP is still the largest party. So it's a kind of a majority, but a reduced majority, indicating that the voters want the NDA, want Prime Minister Modi, want BJP to change the approach, change the way to run the country, to be more sort of inclusive, to be more equitable in a way that address their burning issues, economic issues, development issues, jobs, inflations, inequities, so on and so forth.
Mr. Gupta, do you agree with Professor Rong's assessment? And also, India is the fifth largest economy today, and its GDP growth has been very high, 7%, 8%, topping the world over the past 3 years. How come the voters don't seem to be very happy?
Yes, first of all, I do agree with the opinion that Mr. Rong put out. You know, one has to bear in mind that the BJP, yes, in the previous parliament, it had 303 seats. You need a 272 for a majority. This time it's got 240. But that's more than the entire opposition coalition, which was 232, which is composed of many, many parties, including the Indian National Congress. So the BJP is head and shoulders above the rest in the India's political system, and it maintained a very high vote percentage share, almost equal as last time. So this might have come down to good economic tactics on the part of the opposition. Now, coming to your other part in terms of why have they been punished at a time when India is growing well and has grown well, and the point is true, it has grown well. The problem with Indian growth, and this predates even the BJP, is that it's very capital-intensive growth. In a country with huge labor endowments, one would want the growth to be more labor-intensive and employment elastic. In fact, it is very capital-intensive, and so the headline numbers are large, growth numbers are large, but it doesn't really come in the form of jobs, particularly for youth. And there's a second dimension to it in the sense that India, to an extent, Mr. Modi has been captured by oligarchs. There are very, very rich people around him who have been able to capture the rents of government. And this has not helped competition per se within Indian industry. And again, that has not helped in terms of creating jobs. And so if Mr. Modi is a little less focused on Indian capitalists and a little bit more turns his focus towards Indian capitalism, perhaps the market will do better, and perhaps that will trickle down into more jobs for the poor, for the
Yeah.
youth, and he will have better results next time.
Well, China's Premier Li Qiang has congratulated Modi on his win. And earlier, that was yesterday, and on June 5th, shortly after Modi's win, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also sent a congratulatory message on the social media platform X, expressing hope for a healthy and stable China-India relationship. We know there are problems in our relationship, for instance, the border issue. So, Mr. Rong, what can we expect in terms of India's China policy in Modi's third term?
Certainly, I think China is very much looking forward to work with the new government, the government led by NDA, by Prime Minister Modi and his new cabinet, to ensure the relationship between China and India will be proceeding along the right track. And this is very much, I think, clearly sent out repeatedly in the past few weeks. Remember, I think when the new Chinese ambassador presented his credentials to the president, he also made very much clear about that. So we have seen a very consistent, clear message from the Chinese that the importance attached by the China to the relationship and the readiness to working together with India to ensure the relationship is on the right track. Now, as I always want to argue that the ball is in the court of India, you have a new government, even though the faces are not new, and we have a new situation, new agenda. I would argue that given the opportunities and the challenges that we are talking about for the new government, a stable, healthy relationship between China and India certainly serve the interest of the two sides, and also for the region and for the world.
Yeah, Mr. Gupta, I'm going to give you this last question because Modi has some pretty big goals for India. For instance, he wants to make India the third largest economy in his third term. He said, given our strengths, India is now globally considered most suited for manufacturing world-class goods at competitive cost. Do you think it's going to be wise for India to work more with China instead of trying to replace China, for instance, in the supply chain, so that India can really achieve its goals and deliver to the voters? Keep it short, please. 30 seconds if you can.
Yeah, the supply chain runs through China. India necessarily needs to have a good economic relationship with China and, of course, a good political relationship. My fear, though, is that the relationship is just going to move from currently it's terrible, it's just going to be merely bad. And I think that at the senior level, at the top level, there's just been a falling out. And I don't see much repair happening in the short or in the medium term. And this will hurt India's prospects because India sources a lot of its parts and components from China. And that trade should be expanded, not narrowed down. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, we keep a close watch on the situation. Many thanks, Rong Ying, Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies, and Sourabh Gupta, Senior Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point. As always, thank you for joining us. You've got the point.